Hello, I'm Fei Kwan and you're watching It's About Youth, the show where we speak to Malaysia's younger generation on the issues that matter to them. Now, according to the World Health Organization, it's estimated that 1 in 100 children have autism, also known as autism spectrum disorder, ASD. But in Malaysia, those figures of prevalence remain relatively unknown, or it's not known whether it's accurate. And lack of understanding over these developmental conditions still persists. In conjunction with World Autism Awareness Month, joining us on the show is Jochebed Isaacs, the Director of Early Autism Project Malaysia, as well as Wenanita Angang, Miss World Malaysia, and also an autism advocate. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming. Well, first and foremost, when we're talking about this topic, I have to ask, where do you think Malaysia stands in terms of autism awareness and supporting our neurodivergent youths? Wena, let's start with you.
Okay, so in my opinion, again, as I told you beforehand, a lot of the answers that I'll be giving is based on my experiences. So I am not a professional in this, but based on my experience of working with the National Autistic Society of Malaysia, in the different states that I have been in, there are always different problems being highlighted. So to say that there's an overall conclusion as to how Malaysia is doing when it comes to supporting the autistic community, for example, is too far-fetched for me to answer.
Right.
So I can only say that right now I am a huge believer that we are in the right path of supporting the community.
Okay, but it does differ region to region.
Yes.
And what about you, Jo? Do you agree? And maybe perhaps you could give us some stats on how does Malaysia compare to other countries?
I think definitely compared to when EAP first started, and even when I first started in this line 20 years ago, 16 years ago, we're definitely much more ahead, as Ms. Wena mentioned as well. So I think in this region, maybe in comparison to other more third world or developing countries, we're definitely ahead. But maybe in comparison to very developed, established Western countries, we may still be a bit more behind in that sense. But to give you an example, when we first started 16, 17 years ago, the children that would come for diagnosis would already be 6 or 7 years old, meaning that they were going to go into school and then couldn't access school, national school, and so then they came for diagnosis. Versus now, we're seeing children 20 months old, 2 years old, sometimes even 18 months coming for a diagnosis, which means the awareness is so much more that young parents are immediately bringing their children the minute they spot any red flags. So I think there definitely is a difference and there's definitely progress and we're stepping in the right direction for sure.
Okay, we have made progress.
Yes.
But would you be able to tell me any challenges that still persist, challenges that our neurodivergent youths continue to face in Malaysia?
I think definitely, for all age groups in the area of autism or special needs, it is really access to good quality services. And that's still reflective even in their youth and even in all the different presentations or workshops we're part of. If you look at the Q&A questions coming from the public, it is always, where can I get good quality services, free services, accessibility to services that will actually help their child. And so then even as a youth, you need those services, like whether it's social skills groups or whether it's vocational training that can actually help them be independent, be socially appropriate and have a meaningful life. And then of course you've got the acceptance elements where can they actually go to the community, or can they actually get a job eventually. So I think those are challenges that are very, very real, and depending on which maybe income level you are and how much personal resource you have, you may have better access, but others still may not.
I'd like to touch a little bit on stigma here when it comes to awareness and access to support. Wena, do you think cultural and societal attitudes play a part, and does it impact the experiences of neurodivergent youths here?
I do believe that because coming from Sabah, if we focus on Sabah alone, I come from the city. So of course the awareness level might differ from those in the rural community. So from the experiences of my family members that come from the rural communities, the access to awareness is still lacking. So even though we can say that, as Joe mentioned earlier, the access to quality services is important, but the access to awareness still differs from one place to another. Yeah, so the acceptance does, play a part.
So access to knowledge in the
Yes.
first place about autism, and as Jo said, the red flags, the symptoms, and then kind of going beyond that before you can access all the support and other resources, right? When we speak about resources and support, EAP provides early intervention services, right, for children with autism with the use of applied behavioural analysis therapy.
Yes, that's right.
Could you tell us a bit more about the approach to this therapy and how does it assist our youths?
So essentially, the approach is very well established and researched. It's like more than 40 years old. And over the time, it's also evolved so much. But I just wanted to note that it is one of the most effective, meaning that it actually has been proven to, in more than almost 50% of children, they'll actually catch up. So we're talking about an extremely good prognosis and future for these children who are identified early. They may already have milder autism, so then they're in that category where they can catch up fast, they can learn rapidly, and then they receive this sort of therapy. But this therapy has to be delivered in a way that's individualized. So as we know, autism is a spectrum, so you'll have every child has different needs, different challenges, different levels of functioning. So in order to maximize that child's best potential, you have to individualize it. You have to teach it in a one-to-one setting, and it has to be intensive, because by the time a child gets diagnosed, they already have a gap, a developmental gap, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, the younger they are. And so you got to chase time in this golden window of opportunity of a child's young mind to actually catch up and to close that gap. So even as I say it, individualized, one-to-one, intensive, the challenge with that is it's very expensive. So that's where in other countries, like the US, they have funding, there may be state funding, there may be insurance funding, but it costs thousands of ringgit a month, again, which means that many, many families can't access it. But in terms of how is it effective for every child, it can be very effective if it's delivered in the right way and individualized. So one key to that is actually what we're hoping is that parents, again, like Ms. Wena was saying, if they're in Sabah, wherever they are, if they get the training and they are equipped, they could be their child's own therapists. And they could just do it then, because immediately you cut the cost and all of that. But of course, it comes back to the parents' availability. They might be working as well, their own education level and the ability to understand how to do it. But we at EAP are very passionate about equipping the families, which is why we've started a non-profit arm called the Hope Project. And through that, we've actually started the Autism at Home platform. It's a free online resource platform. We now have over 100 free videos. And so that's the thing, we were thinking that even if people are in more rural areas or outside of KL and the city, most people seem to have a smartphone. Most people seem to be on YouTube or something. So if they're at least, they can watch a YouTube video. And we try to make it simple, but I think it still can be difficult to understand. But at least something simple that parents can start just to get words out, just to get eye contact, just to get their child to engage. That's really our heart, is that every child can have some access,
I love that. And affordability, right?
Is the biggest thing, It is hard, very hard.
It's a big issue. But from your experience, both Jo and Wena, do you have from your experience dealing with children with autism, are there any inspiring stories that perhaps you can share on this show? And how can we use these stories to help improve awareness and understanding of this developmental condition? Wena?
Okay. So the first experience that I've ever had with an autistic child with the project that I started before I even became Miss World Malaysia 2022, it was actually based on the hippotherapy services that I was providing in collaboration with the Bukit Padang Psychiatric Hospital in Sabah. So this is the only psychiatric hospital in the whole of Sabah, by the way.
In the entire state.
Yes. So it's another story for the accessibility for another time. But for the experience that I had was actually with a little boy named Alan. So his mom was telling me all of the stories about how she was, the difficulties that she had in raising an autistic child, having no experiences with any, autistic person within her own family. So the first thing that she mentioned was actually diagnostic. Yes, you can say that accessibility to awareness is an issue, but how do you diagnose a child in the first place? Because most children that are autistic within my community back in Sabah, they are just considered as being naughty, right? And then they get punished,
the lack of
etc.
understanding that.
Yeah, so that awareness to diagnose your child is actually the base in certain areas like Sabah. And on top of that, the inspiring story that I got out of this mom is something that I thought about myself, which is that parents have to dream for their kids when they can't dream for themselves. Right. So what Joe said about parents, providing services for their children in order for them to develop as normal of a life as they can, comes from the parents dreaming for their child.
Oh, and Alan is a very lucky boy then, in the sense.
Supportive family, yes.
Actually, yeah.
Joe, anything to add on?
I feel like that's one of the tougher questions because there's so many. I mean, at EAP,
some of your favorite.
So many. I mean, like, I think we make it a point to celebrate everything because of the spectrum. It's easy to celebrate those that catch up, those that, have a great IQ, they catch up and all that. But then there's everyday kids learn to go to the toilet by themselves. They get a hair. I remember as an intern, the first time the child sat for 20 minutes to get a haircut. He was a little Egyptian boy. He's had afro this big. And when he actually got a haircut, his mom was crying, I was crying, because he could actually sit there without screaming and hitting everybody, or the first time a child has a birthday successfully. But one of the most inspirational ones is a young man. He's now a young man. I started working with him when he was 3. He's now 18, 19, I would say. And he's what we would call like a best outcome child. Like his parents were so involved, his mom especially, doing therapy from a very young age. So he got all that access, transitioned to a great school with great additional supporting teachers and all of that. And so he's not only caught up in his IQ, he became a state swimmer. And what's the inspiring part is for his school project, before he actually graduated high school, but for his last graduating project, he actually did an aquathlon fundraiser. So he did I think 400 kilometers of running, cycling, swimming or something. It was very athletic, and he raised about 6,000 ringgit plus to actually raise awareness on autism. So we actually have a very nice campaign video that features his story and his call to people to actually be more accepting of autism. So that's very inspiring when an individual actually talks about his own journey as an encouragement to other, not only children, but families as well. So you can catch that on YouTube. It's a wonderful story,
It's amazing to hear all these milestones that they're making and the achievements that they go on to make, right? Especially when they get the right access and support to services. Well, a lot to unpack there, but we'll head for a quick break first. Stay with us. Welcome back to It's About Youth, where we're speaking on autism awareness with Jochebed Isaacs, the director of the Early Autism Project Malaysia, as well as Wenanita Angang, Miss World Malaysia, and an autism advocate. Now, previously, we spoke on the challenges faced by neurodivergent youth and how societal and cultural attitudes can impact their experiences and their development. Now, moving on, we spoke a little bit earlier about how early intervention is so crucial, right? And in those early years, access to education is also just as important. How do you think the education system in Malaysia can be more inclusive and accommodating to neurodivergent youths in the country?
So, yesterday, I actually had an event at Sunway University, which is my alma mater.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's called Artistic Autistic. And from that event, I actually learned that Sunway University has decided to include something in their registration form. So at the bottom of the registration form, there's actually a checklist, and someone can actually declare either themselves or their children if they have any different abilities. Yes, correct. So one of those checklists in there was actually if they were autistic. So yeah, they were telling me about this new changes that they are making into the university, not only in terms of registering, but also the services that they are trying to provide for students such as these. So these are small steps that can be, implemented into other schools as well.
Right. So do you mean to say including the option to take being a differently abled person and then to inform the educators so that they'll be aware of the student? Joe, what about you?
I think essentially providing better quality education within the school systems would be excellent. And that's really essentially, I think at primary school level, you're not trying to chase catching up anymore, but you want the child to integrate as much as possible into the school system, still maximize their best learning potential. And I think one way to do that, again, is to involve parents more. So there's some kind of communication that the parents know what the child is targeting, learning, individualized education plans, they call it. And so those kind of plans together with the parents. But within the school setting itself, similar to what Ms. Wena just said, those accommodations that are made by Sunway University could be made even within a school system, whereby, you have children that can actually integrate into the mainstream class for many of the classes. But you have some children with special needs that may only be able to integrate 20% of the time, such as snack time, PE, music class, or something like that. So why not we get them to actually integrate into the class for those types. So there's some level of inclusion, but it's successful for the child with special needs, but it's also good for the rest of the class to become more tolerant, more kind, more compassionate, and then include them in things like concerts, sports day, awards day. So instead of and inclusion. So instead of them just having their own special Olympics or special sports day, there could be a segment within the typical sports day that could include them. So then the rest of the parents are also included in this. And I know there's many great national schools that have PPKI programs, and maybe they're already doing that. But these are some of the strategies that could definitely create a better, more inclusive educational experience.
And beyond schools, are there any other effective support strategies that you think our government should look into to better assist youths?
I think the area of job opportunities is what we've been discussing. I think even with like Mr. Adli from Autism Cafe Project, he's actually created his own cafe for his son, a young adult with autism. And so essentially, I think because of the challenges to get job opportunities, and I think maybe better whether it's incentives, for organizations that some small, medium organizations can't afford to actually hire someone with special needs. But maybe there could be some incentives for certain organizations, could be job coach training, more vocational opportunities. And so this whole April campaign 2023, we've been talking about becoming autism friendly. And there's many organizations doing that, such as Sunway, Pyramid, Sunway Putra Hotel, Sunway Putra Mall, and then you've got Uniqlo, GSC has sensory screenings. So these are ways that actually the private companies and organizations are actually responding by opening their doors, making accommodations, and so on. So that's definitely something that government bodies could also do and go in that direction as well.
Job opportunities comes again to like including them and incorporating them, right? Not just in school, but in adulthood as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And talking about our public spaces, actually, that's very interesting to hear, because one aspect that individuals with autism face is sensory overload. Right. Wena, what would you say? Are there any key features you think that our public facilities can work on to make it more accessible for neurodivergent youths?
So recently, I actually attended an event by EAP, which is the Autistic Awareness Month launching ceremony. And there, in collaboration with GSC, one cool idea that I got out of that is actually having like a calming room in different spots in public areas. So for sensory overload, I think that would be very beneficial for a lot of parents, especially because I have a friend who has a younger brother who is autistic. And so, she is always complaining about like where to take her younger brother when he needs some time for herself, for the child. So even yesterday during the event, I saw some parents who were bringing their children around, and sometimes it gets a bit too loud. And the child just needs a private spot just for a few minutes to calm down, and they can integrate back into the community or event that they're at.
That's very interesting. And I know like malls such as Sunway Putra, they have special days where they dim the lights and they play the music a bit softer. Jo, could you just, for our viewers, to just explain a little bit why this matters so much?
Yep. So what we're talking about is environmental adjustments, accommodations that an organization can do. And again, some are in that position to do that. They may have the resource or the position to do that, but some may not be able to. So when the lights are too bright or the sound, like GSC is able to do that once a month. So they have a special sensory screening that, again, the lights are not so dark, they're a bit brighter, they're turned on, or the sound of the cinema is significantly lower. And so on the autism characteristics, one of the 4 symptoms of that repetitive behavior is sensory related. Either the child is hypersensitive or undersensitive. So this is why it gets quite overwhelming. But what we always recommend, in addition to environmental adjustments, which is what is external, is also trying to equip the child and actually build their tolerance, or what we call desensitization. So that's where actually what some parents may tend to do, especially in like parts of Sabah, is keep them at home. But instead of keeping them at home, what we would try to do is practice at home some of these things, like maybe making the music a bit louder, maybe making the lights a bit, so you're increasing their tolerance, and then you start to do gradual transitions to the community. So instead of like going for 3 hours to the shopping mall, you just go for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you actually incorporate visuals that can communicate to the child what we're going to do, what happens if, you know, you need a break. There's a reward. We get to get your favorite ice cream or go to that, cool sensory room or something. So then what's happening is we're not just changing all the environment, but we're actually equipping the child as well, which will then build the child's confidence and bring them out of their maybe own world, which they may be shutting down because of the overwhelming part. So I always feel it's a bit of a comprehensive approach, where working with the society and the community, but also equipping the child and equipping the family on how to handle it. So a lot of preventative strategies can be done.
And baby steps to kind of ease the child into
absolutely.
the community.
And the more practice. We would say we have 100% success with like hair cutting or even any of that, because all of that is building tolerance. It's something that any child can learn, but it needs to be done in those small steps. And same for tolerance to the mall or crowds or new places, or kanduris, those kind of things, or weddings, like how we do it in Malaysia. We don't go small, it's go big or go home. So our kids are like, they just go home. They're not going to go to this
all
big...
about indulgence.
Yeah, correct. They're not going to go to this big kanduri. But we can help them, enjoy that. Like Raya is coming up. Yes. We equip all our kids for Raya. We try and get them ready to wear the baju. Some even practice to fast, and then salam, get the do it Raya, greetings. You can actually teach children so much, and young people as well, and then they have such a meaningful quality of life. And I think that's the key piece, isn't it? Is that the child can have, and their family can enjoy a meaningful experience of their life still. Yeah.
Well, it's very nice to hear that malls, our other public facilities are able to, or even parents are taking some steps to address this. But with our whole conversation here has also really highlighted the need for better access to support and resources in the first place, right? What do both of you think? Is there anything more that can be done to help improve this access to resources and support, especially in rural areas such as Sabah? Wena?
Okay, so to answer your first question, I believe that for as long as there is still a problem and we deem something as a problem, there's always something better that we can do. So going back to Sabah, I think I would focus on the rural areas, because there's still so much development that needs to be done, not only like in access to services, but as well as professionals, because there's a lack of professional people who are able to take care of these children. Like for example, because the Bukit Padang Psychiatric Hospital is the only psychiatric hospital in Sabah, they will have to, segregate their manpower to go to each districts in Sabah. So it could take like once every 2 months for a child to actually receive some sort of services, if they are even diagnosed. So of course, I think on top of accessibility to services, we should also focus on the professionals that we are sending out to take care of the children.
Because even if you have access to these healthcare services, what's the point when there's nobody?
Like Joe said earlier, it's all about quality as well, right?
And Joe, anything to add on really quick before we wrap up?
There's so much that we can do, but I think that the Rakyat together, we can all do something together. And I think there's so many wonderful organizations, amazing people that want to do more. And I think collectively, if there's a passion to actually help, families, I think we can reach them in some way and give them some sort of access, right? Whether it's training. In fact, we're actually going to be in Kuching and KK for a complimentary training Saturday, 15th of April. So we're hoping just to equip families, but I think those in the rural areas, maybe we could actually go in there or bring, internet, YouTube videos, something that could try and help equip them. Yeah, absolutely.
Baby steps, but as you said, we are heading in the right direction, right? Well, thank you so much for joining me today to speak about this. I've been speaking to Jochebed Isaacs and Wenanita Angang. You've been tuning in to It's About Youth with me, Faye Kwan. See you next time.